So Renetti is nerfed, so we got to go ahead and talk about the new close range meta. And a lot of people have been talking about some sleepers that have kind of been mentioned months ago and no one's really used, and it started coming to the forefront, at least from a fun, gimmicky side. But I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about my thought process when it comes to building the meta, because there will always be questions about, what about this gun? What about this gun? The things that are most important, at least in my opinion, kind of in order. One of the most importants for close range is fast TTK. But obviously that's not the most important thing. If that was the only most important thing, we'd all be using the tiers, single fire with the fastest trigger, because you can get like 130 or 150 millisecond TTK, but that's not everything. Obviously that is important though. The other part is consistency. There are a lot of guns that have consistency issues because maybe their damage per mag, which equates to damage per downs, isn't all that great. If you only have like a 20 round mag, probably not that good in some scenarios versus a 60 round mag. On top of shot placement, if you have to land a headshot, and we'll get this a lot of times when people talk about the guns. Have you tried this? If you do this and if this and that, well, probably if you use a lot of ifs in your description of the gun, it's probably not that consistent. If you go against in solos, if you use it in solos, if they're not plated, if their back is turned, you know, those types of things. Or if you have to hit a headshot, or if you can't hit a limb shot, if you only hit chest shot, this thing kills fast. It's kind of a red flag sometimes. Doesn't mean that those guns can't be good. It's just when I'm recommending a gun that's kind of like the all-around best option, but has consistency issues, it's probably going to be a red flag. The other part is ease of use. This is a one I think a lot of people struggle with. Specifically good players, like the best players. A lot of times if a gun is easy to use for them because they're a top 0.001%, they might recommend this gun to their casual audience or casual viewer, or even average viewer, or slightly above, slightly below average viewer. And the reality is they know full well that if you go take that gun out there, you're not going to get even close to the results of the gun, because maybe it has too much recoil, the damage per mag, or other issues with consistency that don't make up for its fast TTK. The other part is, once you've kind of figured all that out, is the gun fun to use or gimmicky? Sometimes if a gun is super fun and gimmicky, it might outweigh some of these to use on occasion to kind of mix it up and have fun with, but it doesn't necessarily mean it'll be the meta. The reality is, a lot of times if I factored in all of these, we'll usually only come down to one or two guns, but that's kind of boring. So I like to try and give you a little bit more options, because not everyone fits into a cookie cutter box. So although right now we kind of have a one gun best meta, there are other weapons that step outside of that. I updated this snapshot about the TTK to kind of give a general idea when we talk about these weapons. As you can see, the HRM sits kind of at the top. That's pretty much the main meta for the vast majority in the vast majority of situations, which is okay, but we've been using it already for a couple seasons. Hopefully other things get buffed to kind of take its shine away. Obviously we had the Renetti for about like 3 weeks or so, where it was kind of broken. AMR got nerfed and kind of to the ground. The Horus is okay. If you get that one headshot, you'll get a 610 TTK. Renetti, if you get a leg shot now, any leg shot, it drops in the TTK down to 700, which isn't all that great. So that kind of gets dings on its consistency. Ram 9 only has a 10-meter range. You might as well go ahead and use the WSP 9, which although it's fires slower, you're practically getting the same TTK for a little bit further range, and that can be pushed out further with the barrel. Same thing with the striker. You could bump this out beyond the 11 meters. The movement makes up a little bit for it. Like I said though, the HRM is the jack of all trades. A lot of people will comment. We've made videos about these guns back in December and January talking about, hey, they're pretty good, but they've always been those gimmicky guns, maybe fixed to a specific mode like solos or duos, or maybe they don't offer as much consistency because it's core 45, although it can fire insanely fast. The reality though is tracking might suffer, so you might miss more bullets. So that's where the consistency comes in. But if you're an well above average player, you might be able to take advantage of its TTK in a reliable sense. So that's kind of how that part sits. So instead of only giving you the one loadout, because I know people are really most curious about that, I'll give you a few different loadouts. Like I said, there's people that'll skip to this part. They miss out on the explanation. But the main thing here is we'll go ahead and talk about the solo MCW. This build is like 4 months old. And again, these sometimes gimmicky builds could be fun to play around with, especially if you play in specific modes. And you can see right here for this particular one here, overall, it's not too bad. I think this is a pretty solid sniper support. Its consistency to its ability to kill at 600 milliseconds is also pretty nice. But the problem is the 40 rounds per mag. It just doesn't really push it all that far. It's able to barely hang in there. But like I said, lower game modes, you can kind of get away with it. But sleight of hand's probably one of those mandatory things. Then we get into the Core 45. And one of the biggest issues with this gun, in my opinion, is that its fire rate is a little bit wonky. And what I mean by that is right here, it says 800 RPM. And that assumes if you have perfect timings on the 400. I think if you have too fast of a trigger finger, it actually messes up with the trigger, and sometimes you'll get these little skips. If you've used the gun already, we've used it a couple months back, and then we used it back in December. So we've had a little bit, and then we've tried it more recently. And overall, it always has that weird gimmicky feel that some isn't right. You'll be pulling the trigger, and all of a sudden you get these little stops in there that kind of really feel like you throw it off. But overall, pretty solid. It does have a decent amount of vertical recoil that you can kind of just adjust for. Luckily, it's just vertical recoil, so you just pull straight down. And overall, I think it's one of those, again, guns where maybe you might get the reaction like, what the heck they kill me with? And then other times you just tend to miss because you're not able to track properly while spamming the trigger. So definitely try that one out. But the main ones, like I said, that I think that are kind of be in the mix for SMGs, especially since the core you can't buy at a buy station or anything like that, is the Striker 9. This is kind of how I would go with it. Overall, I think there's some other ones where you can get insane movement. I always favor the ability to be able to have a little bit better bullet velocity and range on an SMG, because a lot of times if somebody goes all in on speed, they might be able to move, but if you can shoot straight, you're going to go ahead and kill them quicker than they kill you at that specific range because they already had a drop off and you didn't. It's just kind of a thing, kind of how to balance it out. But that's kind of how I build that one. And then it gives us to the WSP9 as well as the HRM. And there is a slight change with the HRM, which we talked about in the last video. You kind of see how this one's set up. And overall, the only thing I don't like about this one, even though it's very easy to use, is the slow fire rate. If you start missing, you're going to get penalized pretty hard, and that's just the penalty of a slow firing weapon. Also, the open bolt delay kind of makes it have a little bit slower TTK on that first shot if you're reacting to someone. If you're pre-firing, this thing will get the job done well enough, and it excels in that downs per mag category quite well, which makes it great for higher game modes with trios and quads. Then the HRM, we have a couple different options here. The main thing is the 9mm high grain. That's the main difference here between that and then the Princeps long barrel. The main difference there is the range. If we go ahead and check this out with the high grain, you can see that the range sits right around 13, the bullet velocity 521, and that hurts your recoil. But if you go with the Princeps, we'll see kind of, we don't have the penalty the same way, so that helps that. It's not impacting the ADS. The movement's a biggest penalty there, but then you get quite a bit of range and bullet velocity, which kind of help that out on that end. So those are the two. I think you could run this as sniper support, and I would definitely lean towards the long barrel. But if you like the mobility, the high grain is probably the way to go. You're not 6% penalty. So go ahead and try it out for yourself. Unfortunately, we're still in the HRM meta. That's what you're mostly going to run into, die to, and probably feel most comfortable with, even though we do have some fast TTK options in the mix. Let me know what you're working with. Appreciate the support. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.